Easy. All right. First person to. Yeah, sure.
Good morning, Representative.
Hello, gentlemen.
How are you?
Fine, sir.
Remember, we have no gentlemen in the Senate.
I'm an eternal optimist.
That may be a new one. The question I have, you alluded to some. I'm not sure if I know the full answer yet, but in past, there have been land banks that have abused their authority. Kansas City and St. Louis come to mind particularly, where whether it was familial or not in the way they were conducting their business, I don't know that. But there have been times where land has been aggregated for the purpose of maybe amassing a pretty good plot of land and for repurposing and some bigger projects. What in your bill prevents that from happening and may head off some of the abuse that we've seen in the past with land banks?
Well, for one, is that this all is residential. It's not commercial. It's not for joint use or large community projects. It's strictly residential. And so anything that goes through the land bank, it's repurposed, has to be for residential housing.
And then following up here, are there provisions in your bill that would prevent the amassing of fines or charges against the property, so that if there is a profit when all the transactions have been completed, that remaining money might go back to the original landowner?
Well, there are probably all kinds of liens that are probably on the property that governmental entities have placed on there, and what the quiet title will do is it will just eliminate them. There's no monies going back to anybody, but it's just saying no longer are these debt obligations due. And so now the property has value where, any investor who's thinking about buying this or a potential homeowner is going to say, well, gosh, I've got to pay off all this stuff. Well, that just really takes down the value of this property. Now we're saying we've got tools between judicial foreclosure and quiet title where we've got clean fee simple title. And so if nothing else, at least the land's got value, even if, the building on it doesn't. And so that will make it to where it's going to be a lot easier to turn these properties, because we don't have, you're not calculating, well, gosh, I've got to spend all this money before I even can do anything with the property.
Mm-hmm. And finally, according to some of the information that I've looked at, there have been offers made on properties that were held, but they've been refused. Is there something in there that would prevent that if there's a legitimate offer being made not to complete the deal?
Well, Senator, this bill is about 100 pages, and to my knowledge right now, I can't think of a subsection that addresses that, and unless there's somebody, we might have an attorney or two that's going to speak that might be able to address that, but I cannot, off the top of my head, think of an answer for that one.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, so none. We're going to pause again for a minute before we go to testifying to do a executive session. Since we have a quorum, we have 3 bills to vote on today. I make a motion to move into executive session. I have a second. I have a second. We're in executive session. First bill that we're going to vote on today would be Senate Bill 982. I'll move that Senate Bill 982 be brought before the committee. Do I have a second? I have a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is before the committee. I move that Senate Bill 982 be voted out of committee. Do pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. This is Senator Black's bill. He presented on March 12th. Senate Bill 982 repeals annual testing requirement and provides for a scheduled testing of water hydrants. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I shall call the roll to vote Senate Bill 982 out of committee. Do pass.
Senator Brown.
Aye.
Senator Moon. Senator Gannon.
Aye.
Senator Koenig. Aye. Senator McCreary. Aye. Senator Razor. Senator Schwar. Senator Moon. Aye. 5-0.
By your vote of 5-0, the motion carries, and I might add, we will leave the board open for the other committee members to go ahead and vote. I now move that Senate Bill 938 be brought before the committee. Do I have a second? I have a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is before the committee. I move that Senate Bill 938 be voted out of committee. Do pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. I presented this Bill 938 a couple weeks ago. If an owner of personal property stored in self-storage storage defaults on a lien, the operator of the self-storage facility may enforce the lien by selling personal property by advertising sale in the classified section of a newspaper or in any other commercially responsible manner. Is there any discussion on that? Seeing none, I shall call the roll to vote Senate Bill 938 out of committee. Do pass.
Senator Brown.
Aye.
Senator Moon. Senator Gannon. Senator Koenig. Senator McCreary. Senator Razor. Senator Schwartz. 4-1.
By your vote of 4-1, the motion carries. I now move that House Bill 2062 be brought before the committee. Do I have a second? I have a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is before the committee. I move that House Bill 2062 be voted out of committee. Do pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. House Bill 2062 is the eviction moratorium bill. We have heard in this committee several times. This bill was presented by Representative Brown, and we also heard the Senate version from Senator Trent. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I shall call the roll to vote House Bill 2062 out of committee. Do pass.
Senator Brown.
Aye.
Senator Moon. Senator Gannon. Senator Koenig. Senator McCreary. Senator Razor. Senator Schwartz. 4-1.
By your vote of 4-1, the motion carries. Now I make a motion to move to exit executive session. Do I have a second? I have a second. We're out of executive session. Now we won't have any more interruptions. So the first witness to testify in favor of the bill, whenever you're ready, come forward.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jason Zamkus. I'm a registered lobbyist on behalf of the Missouri Association of Realtors. We'd like to go on record in support. We believe that this bill provides a valuable tool to local communities to help them preserve their communities by taking tax delinquent and abandoned parcels, clearing the title, and then returning them to productive use. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Thank you for your testimony. Next witness to testify in favor of the bill, whenever you're ready. Witness. Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next witness testify in favor of the bill. Thank you. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, next witness testify in favor of the bill. Whenever you're ready, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Pat Kelly. I'm the Executive Director of Municipal League of Metro St. Louis. Just like to go on record supporting House Bill 265. In St. Louis County, this is crucial for a lot of our smaller municipalities in North St. Louis County. Some of them have 100 or more abandoned homes that are now owned by the city, and they're trying to take care of them and trying to get them back on the market, but they don't have the expertise to do that. And having a countywide land bank in St. Louis County would really help get these properties and make them productive again. And if I could just take one other minute to Senator Moon to try to answer a couple of questions you had asked. The instances in St. Louis City where policies have changed, because in the past, the elected officials in each ward in St. Louis City had to approve the sale of land bank property, and that's where it lends itself to some of the corruption in St. Louis City. They no longer have that policy. The land bank is separate, operating independent of the Board of Aldermen, which is a good thing. And the other thing with some of the sale of the properties where they were denying people additional purchases was because of an issue that is corrected in the land bank in that the new legislation, in that they were sitting on properties and not making improvements, trying to accumulate properties so that they could do more with them. And again, the new statute would only allow them to hold those properties for a certain period of time before, if they didn't improve them, then they'd have to go back to the land bank. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any more questions, or is there any questions for the witness? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness testify in favor whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Richard Ollis. I'm from Springfield, Missouri. I'm a former city councilman, and I also am president of the board of an organization called Restore SGF, where we promote home ownership and rehabilitate housing in some of our historic neighborhoods. We, along with many municipalities and other organizations, desperately need this tool so that we can repurpose some of these dilapidated properties. Many of these properties are the worst of the worst. They're vacant homes. They're on our dangerous building list. They are in substandard, if not the condition where they need to be demolished. We need this bill, and certainly we're in support of this bill, so we can repurpose these properties into productive use and rehabilitate them for many members of our community. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Senator Boone.
Mr. Ollis, thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Do
Senator
I
Moon.
recognize you as the Citizen of the Year? Is that what is that recent?
Yes, apparently it was a small field, and I was voted out.
Well, congratulations to you on that. Thanks for being here.
Thank you much, Senator Moon.
I might remind the witnesses, too, to leave a form so your testimony is on public record.
Mr.
Whenever you're
Chairman,
ready.
members of the committee, Will Morris, registered lobbyist on behalf of the city of Springfield. So this started out as a very small bill that just included the city of Springfield, and I want to thank the bill sponsor for bringing this forward. It's now expanded. A lot of other communities see this as a necessary tool to address the delinquent housing problem. Want to thank Senator Koenig also for working on some of the language to curb abuses in previous land bank programs. So I think this is a great bill. Happy to answer any questions on it.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none. Is there any other witnesses testify in favor of the bill? Please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, other members of the committee, thank you. I am with Empower Missouri, and I am here to speak in support of HB2065. What we know right now from the data is that we have an incredible housing shortage. This year alone, we're at 120,102 units short for people with very low incomes. We also know that according to 2020 data from the U.S. Census Bureau, in Missouri, we have over 370,000 vacant units. And so we are in support of the land bank because it does provide a way to return these properties to productive use. It also creates a path to home ownership for people who may not have had it before. And with the land banks, they can be used to turn some of these properties into affordable housing units, because we know that when people are in affordable housing and when they are not paying more than 30% of their income, then they do better. The outcomes are better. And they also have more disposable income, which they put back into the community, and that their physical, mental, economic outcomes are better, but it also is good for the community. We also know that there are really big housing issues in the rural community that are getting overlooked a lot. They do not always have access to the same level of funding, the same type of supports and resources, but land banks would help turn some of those properties in rural areas into housing so that they could also benefit from this. And with that, if you have any questions, I am happy to answer.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there any questions? Seeing none, are there any other witnesses testify in favor of the bill?
Thank you.
Is there any witnesses testify in opposition to the bill? Please come forward. Take all the time you need. I think you're the only one.
Just me. Good morning, Angie Schulte, registered lobbyist for the Missouri County Collectors Association. I'm a little torn as to whether there should be opposition or for information purposes. We don't want to kill this program. It's obviously a good program, but there are some things in the bill that touch in Section 140 that kind of affects how the collectors affects how they do all of their collections, and so I've talked to the lobbyists about it. I think they're pretty minor fixes, and we're going to work on getting those taken care of. And that's it.
Are there any questions for the witness? Senator Moon.
Ms. Schulte, thank you for your testimony. Particularly, what in those sections with collections are you concerned about?
Well, one of the things is on page 2 of the bill, the collectors, they feel like that puts them in the decision making of what parcels are going to go to the land bank, and they're really concerned about having to make that decision. They're not sure they want that to just fall on them. And then there's another portion that talks about advertising every 30 days. They're afraid that would be a burden to smaller counties that don't have the staff and the resources to make that happen. And then there's another portion that talks about giving notice. By giving notice to them, they're afraid tax sale investors or attorneys are going to try to get them to tell them how to do that. So they just have some things they'd like to work on there to fix that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the witness? Thank you for your testimony. Any witnesses testify in opposition to the bill? For informational purposes only? All right, seeing none. We're going to move on to the next bills, House Bill 2385, Representative Keathley, whenever you're ready.
What's that?
When are you going to present the bill for us? Whenever you're ready. I got a lot of questions on this deal.
I'm just here at the disposal of the committee, Mr. Chairman. Whatever helps the committee out, I'm for or against. Mr. Chairman, I'm here to present Senate Bill 2385, and with that, I'll open it up for other people to come up and speak. Oh, excuse me. Somebody told me it was the Senate. House Bill 2385.
How many
And I
witnesses
know
do
it's Keathley's bill, and that's about all I can tell you.
Yeah. How many witnesses do we have to testify in favor of? In opposition to? Okay. First witness we'll do the in favor of first and then the opposition last. So first witness testify in favor of whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Jason Zamkus, registered lobbyist on behalf of the Missouri Association of Realtors. Just want to go on record in support of this legislation. We don't believe that government should be mandating who landlords actually rent their properties to just based on their source of income. We would suggest instead that maybe local governments look to the Kansas model, which rather than mandating these kind of transactions, creates an incentive program for landlords that are willing to take those Section 8 vouchers. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
I have a question. So, and this particularly pertains to Kansas City, correct?
This would be statewide in its
Statewide.
application. Obviously,
But what I should rephrase that. This is a real problem in Kansas City, or emerging problem.
yes, the city council recently adopted some housing requirements that would certainly, I think, contradict what we're trying to do in this bill.
Yeah, I look forward to voting for this bill.
Okay.
We'll get it out as quick as we can. All right. Any questions for the witness? Yep. Senator Razor.
First of all, I'm tired of looking to Kansas for answers.
That's fair.
We may have to do that with our teams, hopefully not. What Kansas City passed, does it force people to rent to Section 8? It forces them.
So
if someone
my
has a
understanding
Section 8
was
voucher, they have to take that over other people?
So my understanding was the original proposal would have
What
actually
passed?
created.
What passed?
What passed, I believe, would still require you to take these Section 8 vouchers. I believe in the negotiation process, they took away a lot of the penalty provisions.
Okay.
But I'd have to get a copy of that, and I can get that to your office.
But if there are two people that want to rent it, is the city of Kansas City forcing you to choose the one with Section 8?
I believe that's my understanding,
Or does
yes.
it just say you can't refuse based solely on that one?
The latter. Yeah.
Okay, so we're not, to me, this sounds a lot like my bill Mona. Mm-hmm. You know, we're not
Which is getting a
requiring
hearing
you-
tomorrow, I believe.
It is.
Yeah.
You can't not rent to somebody solely based on the fact that they're gay.
And
So-
as
so
an
you can't
association,
not-
we support your Mona proposal as well.
I think what the city tried to do, or is trying to do, is say you can't not rent to someone solely on this one factor.
I believe that's by and large where we landed in Kansas City, but I do understand that there are other local governments throughout the state that are looking to kind of follow in Kansas City's shoes. And our fear is that the pendulum will swing too far in the wrong direction. Wrong direction. And
We know about that in this building.
Yes.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Well, and what happens to those landlords if let's say you got two people, and they rent to one, and the other person that didn't become the tenant? What can happen to the landlord because they turned them down? My understanding, it can be very financially detrimental to those landlords.
I think it would all be dependent upon the local ordinance that was passed and,
Right.
and the penalty provisions associated with it.
Any questions for the witness? I could say a lot about the problem up there on that, and I'm going to keep my mouth shut. We'll save it for the floor. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Any other witnesses testify in favor of? Whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Doug Stone. I'm an attorney.
Can you turn your mic on, please?
Oh, thank you very much. It is now. Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Members of the committee, I'm Douglas Stone. I'm an attorney in Kansas City at the Lewis Rice Law Firm. I'm here representing an ad hoc group of landlords across all asset classes, from luxury housing to common workforce housing, all of whom are concerned by the requirements that are imposed by the Kansas City ordinance. But I want to start by saying this. Representative Keathley's bill that we're here to support didn't come out of Kansas City. It came out of St. Louis, because St. Louis has also adopted what's called source of income discrimination ordinance, which prevents a landlord from discriminating against a prospective tenant on the basis of their source of income. Seems simple enough. On its face, that would make sense. Money is money, and where it comes from shouldn't really make a difference. That's not the case, however, when it comes to the federal voucher program, because the federal voucher program imposes requirements on landlords, including, by the way, a requirement that the federal government can come in at any time and examine your books and records or your units, your property. And so at least one court in the country has found that to be unconstitutional. Really what's happening is a local government is requiring, and the answer, Senator Razor, is they are requiring it. I'll come back to that. A local government is requiring that its business people accept and enter into a federal program that has quite a number of strings attached. It's not just bad policy, it's unconstitutional. As I said, this started in St. Louis, and then now we've got a situation in Kansas City. The Kansas City ordinance is actually more problematic than the St. Louis ordinance, because the Kansas City ordinance doesn't just deal with Section 8 vouchers. It also deals with how a landlord can and cannot ask questions to vet prospective tenants who are going to be not just renting property owned by the landlord, but who are going to be joining an existing community of residents who themselves are concerned about who their neighbors are. This bill takes the power away from the property owner to decide to rent or not rent to someone, and places them in, frankly, in jeopardy of making the wrong decision. So Senator Grazer, if I can turn to your question, Senator Razor, Grazer, yeah, okay. When I, as a landlord, one's sexual orientation is not an indication of their ability to fulfill their rental contract. One's gender is not an indication of the ability to get to follow through on your rental contract. One's income or criminal background history or eviction history is an indication of whether or not they are a reliable tenant to whom I should allow into this community that I've developed of other people that live there. I'm torn because my usual analysis would be that this is a matter of local control. And I will tell you that as a Kansas City, and I sometimes bristle at some of the things that you all do here when it comes to Kansas City. I'm just going to get that on the record. This is different than that. This is, if you think this is going to stop at Kansas City, that would be wrong. Columbia, Springfield, Rolla are all on the sites of the proponents of this type of local legislation. And we need to make sure that as a state that we're not making it more difficult for people who invest in our state to do business here. We've got a witness who's going to tell you what it means for them as boots on the ground when they have to vet tenants or go with a Section 8. The last thing I want to leave you with is this. And I appreciate you indulging me some time. my group worked a lot for a month or more with the city council in Kansas City trying to reach a compromise bill, because we acknowledge that there's a housing issue in our state and certainly in our city. And we proposed policies that were more balanced than the ordinance as originally introduced. A couple of those things made their way into the final ordinance that was adopted, but it is still a set of parameters that are forcing investment out of our community. I know of landlords who've already sold their buildings because they don't want to be subjected to the risk of fines and jail penalty. And so my last comment is this. I'll leave it at that. Stand for the
Thank you for your
questions.
testimony. I got a little comment here. So, Empower Missouri testified on the last bill, and I'm not throwing you under the bus, but of the housing crisis, or shortage, not crisis, the shortage we have in the state. As a rental owner or a rental property owner, I can guarantee you, if my local municipality starts passing ordinances like this, I would rather my property set empty or sell them before I have to deal with this. So in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong in my thinking, this could create even a worse housing problem for, not enough housing. Like you just said, when people don't want to deal with this, they just sell it.
Here's what they do. You're absolutely correct. The other thing they do is on this,
Or raise the rent where they don't have to deal with Section 8.
They raise
So then
the rent.
you're creating more and more problems when instead of, I get the idea of trying to help people and solve it, but this is not the way to do it.
I agreed.
Senator Koenig.
To inquire. The chairman is absolutely right. I mean, if you want investment into housing, you have to allow property owners to have that autonomy to do what they feel what they want to do with that investment, or they just simply won't invest. And I know with some of these vouchers, you don't know exactly how much money you're even going to get. So what if you wanted, in order to make the numbers work to rent a house, let's say you needed $1,200, and then the voucher comes in and saying you're only going to get $1,000. I'm assuming that these municipalities are going to force you to rent your house for $1,000 then?
They
No?
may not, but they won't. But here's what does happen. That took 2 months.
Right.
That process.
And you might not have known how much that voucher was
That's
going
right.
to be. And
That's
then
right.
now all of a sudden you have a tenant that isn't going to pay you the money, so you're going to reject them because the voucher's not for enough money. And then you just lost out several months in rent.
So suppose you're someone who owns 6 or 10 units. We're not talking about the 1,000-unit owner, right? They've just lost 2 months of rent. That for a mom and pop operation, that could be a year's worth of profit.
And then, you also have additional inspections that you might not want to deal with that are more costly to deal with than just potentially renting to someone who's not going to have that voucher. So there are added costs, and that's definitely government intrusion into personal property, and it's going to definitely scare some people away from actually providing more housing.
What we've seen is out-of-town investment. And because out-of-town investment is a little more efficient, they have a broader scale where they can deal with. And so what happens is now when Mr. X or Mrs. X need to repair their unit, they used to be able to pick up the phone and call Harry. Hey, Harry, landlord, I need this fixed. There's no Harry anymore. Now they have some internet-based something or other where they send in a request. This is a solution that created more problems than it solved.
Any other questions? Senator McCreary.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. So, and we had a chance to talk yesterday. I just, generally, I try to be respectful of local control, and I shared this with you. And sometimes what happens in this building is local elected officials do something, the voters, the citizens are frustrated because they can't get their local electeds to fix something or to react or whatever, so things get brought here. And I think it puts us sometimes in a awkward spot where we're supposed to be like, it feels like a courtroom in a way, like we're supposed to decide, goes and what stays. Do you have any sense that the local elected officials in Kansas City are paying attention to this, and that this hearing and this bill, having some movement might get people back to the table so that there can be some fixes to this? Or
Well, sitting behind me is Kansas City Councilman Jonathan Duncan, who is going to be testifying in
Okay.
opposition to this bill. And it's a good question
Okay.
for Councilman Duncan.
very good. Yep, I'm happy to do that. I did not know who that was, so thank you. I thought that was Representative Keathley,
It only
quite
ma-
honestly.
it only makes it a million times more awkward for me, but that's okay. I think Councilman Duncan will have an understanding, and
Okay.
he's a great guy.
Very good. No, I'm happy to ask him that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Razor.
Thank you for your testimony. One of the first things you said was worrying about ability to pay rent, and I get that piece, but Section 8 is a federal program, and short of giant budget cuts, I think the federal government will pay its bills. Just saying, that rent money's coming. No, they won't pay their bills.
That's not how it works, with
Okay.
all due respect.
All right, well, you can explain that to me later. You know Kansas City is growing and downtown is becoming more vibrant, which makes Midtown and Westport much more expensive. I have a friend who is renting a house that the back of it's literally falling off for like $1,500 a month. It's a one-bedroom place. And it also means that North Kansas City is becoming a hot area, and people have got to live somewhere. Now, that's a very localized, looking at it, issue, right? As the city grows, property goes up, and I get that. Everybody wants to make a profit. When we look at it globally, here's my concern, is that as technology rises, that's great for business because you don't have as much payroll. But it's less jobs. I mean, we don't have as many checkers anymore because they're self-checkout. I guess we could go the way of New Jersey and force gas stations to still have full service, just to have jobs for people. But we're getting to a point where it's not just the worst of society, if you want to use that phrase. That's a terrible phrase, but from what I'm gathering that use Section 8, it's people who are in hard times as well. It's not people who want to cause trouble. What I'm hearing is a lot of stereotype, and what I'm hearing is also, we don't want Section 8 in our neighborhood because it brings down property values. That's a lot. When you talk about in our neighborhood, you're not going to be able to sell the house as much. It starts to worry me about those issues, because that's what was said, when you were told you can't not rent to black people,
Right.
can't not rent to Jews,
Right.
and everybody was freaked out about it. Our property values are going to go down. I'm kind of hearing that.
We're not
now.
saying that at all. That's not what the issue is.
Then what's
We're
the
not-
issue?
So there's two issues. There's the voucher issue, which
Okay.
is about red tape and delays in getting payment. And Mr. Gwynn, who's here, can talk to you about that.
Okay.
Okay. When I was talking about caring who our neighbors are, it's not about poor. I grew up in public housing. Okay. It's not about someone's level of income. I'm talking about the fact that I can't vet a criminal
You
background
can.
check.
You can. You're talking about the original version.
No,
What
no.
passed the city council does allow you to look through that.
It does allow you to look to it. But what it says is that you have to give consideration to what they tell you about the reasoning. Okay, that's what it says. That's what it says.
Okay.
Okay.
That doesn't sound like a mandate. That sounds like a reasonable.
I don't. Here's the thing. I don't have to rent to somebody with a criminal background check. Okay. I don't have to. I didn't say you do. But what happens is, it used to be that somebody could call a landlord and say, "Hey, I got some things in my history, and I want to run this past you before I apply here because it's going to cost me $50
Yeah.
or $100 to apply." And the landlord used to say, "Well, tell me your story, and then I'll, or you put an ad in the paper that said,
Sure.
550 credit required or something like that. You can't do any of that anymore. Now what happens is, because I have to allow them to explain themselves to me, which again, on its face, sounds like it makes perfect sense. To do that, they have to apply. And so now what's happening is when someone who is on the cusp calls a landlord in Kansas City and says, I want to see if I'm going to qualify, I can't do that. I have to make you file the application, pay the application fee, go through the process. And by the way, I've got to do that while there may be somebody else
Sure.
who qualifies that
I want to speed this up just a little
Sure,
bit.
I'm sorry. Sure, go ahead.
So let me just say, I think you did testify, though, earlier that you could not look at criminal background. And
I misspoke if I said that.
I'm just saying you can, and you can question them, but you are not mandated to rent to somebody with a criminal history in Kansas City. That, I just want to make that on the record, and the councilman can speak to more details.
Sure. But
Thank you.
here's what happens, if I may. What happens is you've now put it, so when we worked with the council, we suggested empirical standards. So we said, if you've been evicted in the last 3 years, if you've had a violent criminal background, then I don't have to rent to you. And that way, I know what the answer is. Okay, as a landlord doing business, now what you've put in place instead is a complete set of subjective criteria that every time I make a decision against that person, I'm subjected to the possibility of a complaint.
So would you, and I'm not saying I am yet, I want to hear what the councilman says, but instead of just banning this sort of bill, we put more restrictions like you said. We finesse it just a little bit. Make sure people have a roof over their head and make sure the other folks are still making money.
I will tell you, as a human, if I believed that this ordinance put more people in housing, I wouldn't be here. When this ordinance was before the city council for hearing, the executive director of the Kansas City Housing Authority testified against it. And do you know what he said? He said two things. One, nobody asked me my opinion. I'm only the executive director of the Housing Authority. And then the second thing he said was, we don't have a voucher problem. There are plenty of voucher units that are available in Kansas City. What we have is a deficiency of vouchers. And this bill does nothing to solve that problem. That's a problem of funding at the federal government level. So once again, in an effort to do what we think is good, we have the unintended consequences of creating more problems than we have solutions.
I look forward to hearing the councilman.
So let me ask you this. So this complaint thing has me intrigued. So what is the process on that? So if somebody with the voucher gets turned down because you go with, let's say you got one or two people, what is the complaint process that they go through? I mean, what can it be for? Could it be anything? And then what's that monetary cost to the landlord? Because that right there is what would make me not want to do business in Kansas City in the rental business.
So there is a penalty of a $1,000 fine or up to 180 days in jail. I'm not going to say that the city is going to start throwing people in jail, but there are local mom and pops to whom that's a very threatening
I guarantee
concept.
you this is going to create more problem in the long run than what you said it earlier. You start getting these out of town companies or out of state companies coming in here that they have no care about that community whatsoever. It's all about making money to them. They don't know what's going on in that community. They don't care about the people there. And are there any other questions for the witness? Seeing none. Next witness testifying in
very
favor of the
much.
bill, please come forward.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, senators. My name is Eddie Gwynn. I'm here representing on behalf of Landlords, Inc. of Kansas City, Missouri, an organization that brings landlords together in that Kansas City, Missouri area. I am in support of House Bill number 2385 to a lot of the points that the senators have kind of asked questions on. First of all, I would just say as a landlord, I want tenants. I mean, I would be absolutely crazy not to want tenants, but what I also want is the latitude and the ability to effectively screen the persons who go into my properties. I am a person who actually houses some of the worst of the worst. I have murderers who live on my properties. I have rapists who live on my properties. But I have to be very careful where I place those individuals. I have to be very careful, you know, in terms of when I take those applications in, that I'm not putting them or the persons around them in any type of jeopardy or harm. To your point, Senator, if I chose not to take an application from a person who had been convicted of a crime, a heinous crime, because of an issue, and they decided to file a complaint against me, not only to Mr. Stone's point, I have to incur the legal cost of getting an attorney to actually go and represent me in court, you know, to combat that particular issue. And the whole time, my unit is sitting vacant. So I'm losing rents the entire time that property is sitting vacant. And if I have a mortgage on that property, I'm still maintaining a mortgage payment, I'm still maintaining insurance, and I'm still required to pay my taxes, obviously. So just having the latitude as a landlord, I don't mind taking a Section 8 voucher, but I do want to be able to maintain the ability to effectively screen the people who come in my properties. In addition to a Section 8 voucher, there's other voucher programs that are not being talked about. There's many vouchers in Kansas City. I house people for Salvation Army. I house people for Truman Medical Center. And under those programs, once again, you know, you kind of don't know what you're getting sometimes. I've had people do damage to my properties in excess of $9,000, documented $9,000. And I mean, at the end of the day, I'm responsible for those repairs once they leave, and then they're able to just go and move on to the next property. So I think that there needs to be definitely a revisiting of the way that current ordinance is written specifically to Kansas City, Missouri. But I think House Bill 2385 will at least give the landlords the latitude or the ability to effectively do business in Kansas City, Missouri.
I can almost bet many of the people that draft the language on this ordinance probably have never owned a rental property. And I've said this many times throughout my life. After I got into the rental business, I can guarantee you everybody should have to own one rental property in their lifetime, because it will definitely change your perspective on everything. Any questions?
I probably agree with you on that point. I think everybody should be a server or a bartender or work in the service industry somehow. We'd all be a little nicer to those folks. Does the ordinance just flat out prohibit you from knowing whether or not somebody destroyed their previous property? Or does it?
You can't hold it against them.
Or does it, you can't hold that against them? Can't hold anything against them. If they have a Section 8 voucher, you are required to take them no matter what.
Not to take them no matter what. You still have the ability to screen. But if I have a person who has a Section 8 voucher, and I have a person who doesn't have a voucher, and I take the person who doesn't have a voucher, but that person who has a Section 8 voucher feels like I didn't take them for whatever reason. Now, the thing about Section 8, let me clarify. I don't believe you can have a felony and get a Section 8 voucher. There's certain requirements to qualify for a voucher. So you don't just get a voucher. So no, you can't just say, or if I don't just take them because of that reason, that I'd be in trouble. But if they file a complaint, and I think that's the baseline, it's the complaint filing. Yes, we do have some latitude under the current ordinance to kind of, you know, discern. But if they file a complaint against you, it's the complaint process that's for me that creates the problem for me.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
It's the paperwork and the complaint.
It's the complaint.
So,
if the complaint goes forward,
we do one or two of those complaints.
Yes.
And they're all swatted down. Like, no, this is not, because you're going to have to prove this is why you didn't get it.
Right.
That word's going to start spreading like, oh, no, this isn't going to work. Like, you're not going to be able to get that house by threat of a complaint.
Right.
Because that same argument is used for my Mona bill.
Okay.
Is businesses are going to have people coming up and, you know, you've got to hire me because I'm gay. No, they don't. No, they don't. And we're not going to all flood the, you know, make you pile up a paperwork every time we get fired.
Right.
I kind of see the same. I don't know. People are struggling out there,
People are struggling.
and they need a place to live. And in Kansas City, that's hard to find right now.
Yes, sir. And like I said, I own 50 properties in Kansas. I'm not the biggest, but I'm not the smallest. I've been in this business for 15 years. The reason that I, myself, had decided to do this is because I had been convicted of a felony. Nobody would rent to me. So I said, hey, if I get the opportunity, I'm going to in turn go back and begin to help others who fall into the same situation as I. So do I discriminate against people for that reason? Absolutely not. But I do want the latitude as a business owner to have the discretion to say who comes into my property. I've had a house burnt down before because a tenant got upset with me over the fact that we do inspections on our properties. I mean, once again, that's kind of another issue. But I mean, still, just having the ability to effectively discern who comes in my property, I think should be my right.
So I agree. I think we're talking about details here.
Yes.
So.
Well, and here's the other thing too. So you get these complaints,
Yes.
and you come out on the right side of that complaint. It still costs you money.
And it's recorded.
So the city ought to be making the loser pay on that deal. That
doesn't happen.
Yeah, of course it's not ever going to.
Yeah.
So, but if you have to hire an attorney and you have to be represented, I mean, it's going to cost you money regardless of you when you're not. And trust me, I get it. There's not a lot of money in rental properties. The money in rental properties is when you sell them.
Right.
So, thank you for what you're doing, giving back to your community. Is there any other
Appreciate
questions for the witness? Seeing none.
No.
Next
Right.
witness to
Thank you.
testify in favor of the bill, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Sam Wiles, registered lobbyist, Missouri Apartment Association. Nothing to add. We're just going to go on record in support.
Thank you. Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, next witness testify in favor of the bill, please come forward.
Angie Schulte for St. Louis Apartment Association, just going on record in support as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, any of the witnesses testify in favor of the bill, please come forward. All right, seeing none, first witness testify in opposition to the bill, please come forward whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senators. My name is Jonathan Duncan. I'm a sitting city council person in the city of Kansas City. I represent the 6th District, which is South Kansas City. I'm also a combat veteran and diagnosed with PTSD. I came onto council to house veterans, and this bill, HB2385, will hurt veterans. It says that a landlord can discriminate based on any federal housing program. That includes houseless and housing insecure veterans. And I think this is too broad of a brush. To answer some of the questions and some of the comments that were proposed by Councilor Stone and others, we listened. We went through months of negotiations in this process. One of the sponsors of this Kansas City ordinance is a landlord. And so we listened, and some of the things that we found and that we listened to the landlords and landlords association, apartment association, similar to what somebody said, we did. We incorporated a $1 million landlord risk mitigation fund as part of this ordinance to ensure that if there were any administrative costs, or if what we would refer to as a high-risk tenant, a tenant on Section 8, a tenant with a past eviction, or a tenant with a past conviction, damaged a property, that the landlord would be made whole through this risk mitigation fund. We also established a landlord liaison position to help landlords understand the program. We worked with Ed Lowndes, who is the Housing Authority Director. I actually have a thank you from Mr. Lowndes after we passed this ordinance for incorporating some of the changes that he suggested. One of the other things that we did, we clarified that landlords can deny rental applications based on individual factors such as criminal convictions, credit score, evictions, alleged damages, rent-to-income ratio, etc., and clarified that violent and sexual offenses are grounds for denying an application. We also permitted consideration of recent evictions and alleged damages within a year. So a blanket, right now, per this ordinance, a blanket, we do not accept applications from tenants who have been evicted within the last 12 months. is permitted by this ordinance. Similar to what Senator Razor said, this is not saying that you have to accept a HUD voucher. This is simply stating that you can't simply have a blanket statement that says, we don't accept vouchers here. In listening to Ed Lowndes from the Housing Authority and other statements and Councilor Stone's comments, due to lack of federal funding, we have 17,500 families in the city of Kansas City who are waiting for a housing voucher today. It is a 2-year wait to get a housing voucher. Once you get a housing voucher, there's about a 90-day time period that you have to find a landlord who will accept your voucher. And on average, we have hundreds of families who are unable to find a landlord today. The purpose of this ordinance in Kansas City is to house more people. And we listened, we took care, and we're intentional to listen to the concerns from landlords, the Apartments Association, and others. I have also a thank you from a realtor brokers group saying thank you for taking our consideration. Thank you for listening to us. Not here to make anyone do anything they don't want to do. We just want to make sure that everybody has a roof over their head in Kansas City.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for your service to your country. Are there any questions for the witness? Senator Razor.
Thank you, Councilman. I want to talk about just what you said in your testimony, not what was before. You said there's a 2-year wait to get a housing voucher in Kansas City?
Correct.
And we heard earlier it could take up to 2 months for a landlord to start getting paid. It sounds like we have a delay problem. I mean, how can we fix that piece?
So
how can we get more vouchers into people's hands quicker and get landlords paid on time and get people off the street?
The 17,500 is due to the fact that we don't have enough federal funding to provide vouchers to everybody who needs one in the city of Kansas City.
So we all need to call our Congress people and say
100%.
All right, everybody here heard that.
As far as the 2-month delay, as part of the $1 million landlord risk mitigation fund, as part of this ordinance, that will cover that delay in rent. We incorporated that into this ordinance.
Okay.
So how cumbersome is that, though? Because I can tell you, the bank's going to want their money in 30 days. So if they're out like a couple of months or whatever, and you can apply for this mitigation or whatever fund. I mean, how quick is that? I mean, do you get it like then, or is it another 30-day process? Because if you owe money on these properties, the bank doesn't care. They want their money.
Right.
They're not going to wait 60 days.
Mr. Chairman, we just passed this ordinance, and it hasn't even gone into effect yet. It won't go into effect until August 1st.
Okay. Any other questions for the witness? Seeing none. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next witness to testify in opposition to.
Mr. Chair, Senators, again, hi. As I mentioned earlier, I am a affordable housing policy manager with Empower Missouri, the largest anti-poverty advocacy organization in the state of Missouri.
Could you state your name, please, for the record?
Oh, yes, Misha Smith. And, but I'm going to pull on my experience before I came here as a program manager at a housing agency over 7 different programs. Because I feel like a lot of what is happening here is a lack of understanding about what these bills or what these source of income discrimination bans are hoping to do, and then also what the voucher program looks like. So the first thing I want to say about the source of income discrimination bans, we are not asking for special treatment. If they have a voucher, you are forced, you have to rent to them or you're in trouble. We're asking for equitable access. Discrimination against low-income renters and renters with vouchers is real. That can look like asking for excessively high move-in deposits, they labeled them high-risk fees. And under the federally funded programs for the vouchers, we have funding that will cover deposits. But because it's a federal program, there are guidelines. They haven't caught up the language to allow us to pay high-risk fees, which would cause someone to lose out on moving in because that high-risk fee was excessive. And the other thing is that we saw landlords who wanted to have a different type of lease for voucher holders than their non-voucher holder tenants. You can't do that because we let them know they are bound to the same lease. They are bound to the same requirements. If they violate that lease, they're not only having to deal with the landlord, they also have a housing case manager. And so they have like two sets of people over looking over them in this unit to make sure that they're staying in compliance, that they're paying rent. They have to report income changes because that could also impact the amount of rent that is being paid by the program. Because if they have any type of income, they have to pay 30%. And the housing case managers that were under me, you know, you have to do a check-in frequently. Some of the other types of discrimination would be issuing lease violations a lot more often against tenant holders, which could lead to an eviction against no actual fault of the tenant. And as we've talked about, recent evictions keep people out of housing. And so what we're asking for isn't just if you have someone with a voucher and someone without a voucher, you have to choose the person with the voucher. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that we want the screening process to be equitable and we want it to give the same consideration. Yeah, if you have any questions. Oh, the funding of the program. The federal funding over these voucher programs, it hasn't reached the levels in almost a decade that it used to. And so a lot of the issue with these vouchers is that there's not enough funding.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Razor, you have a question?
Yes, very quickly. I feel like whatever this bill was trying to do, I might be on the opposite side of it because I can put myself in both positions and think through it. So recent evictions, I can understand, like if you have recently been evicted, well, now where am I going to live?
Right.
And it might be on the street. But if you're a landlord, and especially a smaller number of properties, that might be your income. And you got to look at, do I trust that this person's going to pay me?
Right.
Because I've got to pay my own mortgage and this mortgage. So that has to be a factor, right?
Yes. And when we had someone come in and we did a really big screening process because we had to look at any convictions that could keep them out of certain housing, evictions. And a lot of time we let them know you have a recent eviction, especially if you have an unpaid recent eviction, it's going to be harder. And we did have landlords that would work for that, but we knew that the moving costs were going to be much, much higher. And so we had to prepare them for that. And also, it was mentioned, when you take someone with a voucher, you don't know how much rent you're getting. You do. Landlords are disclosed that. There is a fair market rent that is set every year. You can go online to HUD's website. And then also, if you are taking a voucher, you're working directly with that housing agency who is going to disclose all of that to you. Before the tenant ever moves in, you know how much will be paid total for the unit, how much the tenant is responsible for, how much the landlord is responsible for, and they are also made aware that it could take up to 45 days and that that payment comes in a lump sum. But most of the landlords have worked with the programs long enough that they are aware.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any
Yes.
questions for the witness? All right, seeing none. Any other witnesses testifying in opposition to, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Sam Panettiere, registered lobbyist for Health Forward Foundation. Come at this from a health perspective. We think that housing certainty helps with health outcomes. And if, being on the ground there, we think that, City Council did a good job of including all stakeholders, got a lot of feedback, changed the originally proposed ordinance considerably for to the final form. And, am sympathetic to landlords. My father's been one for a long, long time. And, we just see it as something that doesn't impose a mandate, but something that just tries to kind of level the playing field and help those that may not get the ability to rent a better opportunity for that. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. Any other witness testify in opposition to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Garrett Webb, registered lobbyist for the Veterans Community Project. We are, I guess, an opposition light. We work very, very closely with a number of our landlord partners in both Kansas City and St. Louis City, where we operate tiny home communities for homeless veterans in providing transitional housing and wraparound services. Our main concern stems from once our residents transition out of living within the community, which is on average about 12 to 18 months from when they move in, we want to make sure that they have access to safe, affordable, and accessible housing, and that's within their means. Oftentimes, these individuals are just beginning to get their life back on track to get an income, and we have concerns over their ability to access housing outside of the community when they're transitioning to the next phase of life. And so that's why we are slightly in opposition to the bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you. Are there any other witnesses testify in opposition to? For informational purposes only. All right. Well, with no other business to become before the committee, I move to adjourn. I have a second. We're adjourned.